So with that introduction, let me ask the panelists in order to make their brief comments on what is, from their perspective, the governance problem today in this context of North-South relations. And may I start with you, President Kagame?
Well, thank you very much. Let me address this by starting with the two crises that define the pessimism in the South about this international cooperation. One is when COVID happened. One is COVID, another is what happened with inflation and interest rates, the interest rate crisis that followed. With the COVID, it was clear that access to vaccines and therapeutics had a problem, and it was mainly concentrated in the North. The South was to be considered much later, even then very slowly, nearly too late, because the South did not have this capacity to produce their own vaccines or therapeutics. And then coupled with many years of fiscal stimulus by the West, we saw that they developed an inflation crisis. And the response to that was to raise interest rates, which really many in the South are still paying a very high price for. Now, we cannot address this inequality by just mitigating the crisis, but rather we need to integrate, to bring in, to involve developing countries like Africa and other developing countries from the beginning, to have the conversations around how these inequalities should not be developing and later on affecting the particular parts of the world. So it has to be from the beginning. It's not just at the time when crises have happened that then you start making consideration of what to do for the South, but rather they should be involved. And Africa should be given, and there are tools that are there, that are available, to actually work on some of these things that are needed to be addressed. And Africa will therefore stand to gain and have access to most of these things required.
Response or points?
Well, there's no doubt we find ourselves at a juncture where the demand for resources exceeds the resources available. You know, the needs coming out of Ukraine, the Middle East, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, you know, so many things, including basic development, healthcare systems, education systems, all of these, the needs are pretty incredible. And I'd say there's three things we can do to improve that situation that we have a shortage. The first is we should try and be more generous. Those who have the most, whether it's countries, companies, or individuals, should be pushed to be more generous. You know, for example, in the aid category, getting up to 0.7%, or like Sweden and Norway, getting even beyond, you know, that's imperative. The second thing is to focus in on the highest impact areas where a dollar of resources is effective. I would say that there's almost a factor of 100 difference between some initiatives versus others. and we really need to study that and do well. And foremost in that is going to the countries, including in Africa, and saying, what are your priorities? You know, health, nutrition, education, where would you like to have these partnerships focus? The final area is innovation. There's been far too little innovation on the needs of the global south, whether it's malaria, whether it's their crops that go way beyond the big three, rice, wheat, and maize. They have unique ecosystems, and the amount we put into improving that agricultural productivity is dramatically less than it should be. I'll just finish with one example that should remind us that the system of cooperation sometimes achieves miracles. Gavi was announced here at Davos in 2001. It raised money to buy vaccines. Of course, Ngozi was a great chairman for that, and everyone here has had some engagement with Gavi, I think, that we're all proud of. And at that time, over 10 million children died every year. And largely because of getting these vaccines, which were only available in the rich country, getting them out to all the children. You know, Rwanda is an exemplar with a 97% coverage rate. Those deaths have been reduced to 5 million a year. The Sustainable Development Goals have, which are timed for 2030, have a goal of getting that to 2.5 million. Because of the pandemic and many other things, we won't achieve that. But the question is, do we keep going down? Do we get there during the 2030s or not? With the right prioritization, with taking innovation, including the latest AI innovation, I think despite all these challenges, we can still do that. To do trials where we practice, okay, are we ready? What would we need to do? And then we need to build better tools. For many of these problems where the total amount of money is going to be super limited, and some elections would make the money even more limited than it is today, we have to innovate. And a great example of that is now the factories that make mRNA vaccines. A group in Belgium, funded by the foundation, can make those very inexpensively. And for me, the issue is not having vaccine factories in magic places. It's having enough capacity in the entire world that we can get vaccines to everyone. Because who you want to discriminate against, if the factories are cheap, you're going to have that capacity. In fact, more vaccines were made in India. We funded Serum 2 months into the pandemic. They created a factory. We had a challenge that those vaccines, which were going to Africa for a period, became unavailable. But that was a South issue that challenged that. We really need to up the dialogue of, given limited resources, where should the grant money go? I would claim that nutrition and vaccines will always rise to the top of that list. And so as we see, is Gavi replenished later this year, it'll show, are we maintaining the very highest impact investment that was ever made? And likewise on the innovation agenda. President Kagame and I were talking about how Rwanda's moving forward on these digital initiatives and making multiple places in the South, including Rwanda, India, and many others, a laboratory where AI healthcare, AI education is done not 5 or 10 years after it's done in the North, but done at the same time. And in fact, given their shortage of doctors, in some sense you could say it should be even faster. And if we can find the right cooperative effort, I think we can surprise people on how quickly we provide benefits there.
So we have, unfortunately, only 5 minutes left. And I know how strict they are, and people want lunch. So you've got a minute each. So what I would like you to focus on, I knew this will be a problem, because there's so much to talk about. In the light of what you've heard, in the view that we have to solve these problems, it's not you're in actual doing things, what is the most important single thing that you want to see happen which will make things better from where you sit? And you have a minute. I apologize. President Kagame.
Well, I'm an optimist as well as a realist, so I see things for what they are. There are problems, and they can be addressed. The underlying importance lies in cooperation, and the people can still cooperate. But we cannot deny the fact that there are differences within nations, whether in the South, but more significant South and the North. There's no question about that. And there is domination, if you will, sometimes. There are dictates that people bring to play into whatever is happening every day. So we can, and these debates have been there for a long time. This is not the first debate about that. So, but that means if such a debate has been there for a long time, it also means the problem is continuing. But we can really address all these matters through cooperation and also looking at the root cause of whatever problem we are talking about.